So that's generally the biology of a. So this is a honeybee, and they have more hairs than we have, about 2 million on a honeybee. If you were to blow this up to the 400 level, you'd see that even their eyes have hairs on them. So they're just little magnets for pollen, and it's amazing. So that blow up right there with the little pieces of pollen is this little segment of leg right here. That's a 400 times blow up. And you can just see how they collect pollen, and sometimes you'll see them so laden with pollen, it looks like a blob of pollen flying through the air, especially with sunflowers and some of the really heavy. But it's amazing. The average hive will go through about 40 pounds of pollen a year. And you can collect it, of course. It's very healthy for you, as long as you get pollen that doesn't come from China. So that's not good today for you. So they're just amazing. In the journeyman course with the University of Montana, you dissect a bee and look at all of its parts, at least at the 400 level, and it's quite amazing. So the bee's body is chitin. So all the way around this bee is just in a big shell, and inside of it there is a fluid called hemolymph that's blood, the bee's blood. It's clear liquid, and in some cultures they'll eat the bee, take out the stinger and eat the bee because it's sweet. It's sweet just like honey is. I've not tried one, so at any rate, and the larva is the same way. And many cultures harvest the larva and eat the larva because it's sweet. So the hemolymph is really open in here, and just as the bee flies and flexes, that hemolymph changes location inside and bathes all the different organs and so forth inside. There is a little heart in the bee right here. So as the hemolymph is pushed into the heart, there's a valve that closes behind it, and it's constantly pushed further forward, and that heart simply bathes the brain of the bee. So it pushes the hemolymph up over the brain of the bee to make sure that the brain always has enough glucose to function. And so in that course you'll have to look at that entire tract, as well as finding different maladies that the bees have. And so a little different system that we have. So the drone. Every hive has drones, and it depends on the characteristics of the queen, on how many are laid. But the queen can lay unfertilized eggs. The worker bees are fertilized eggs. They're females. And the drone comes from an unfertilized egg, and it takes 26 days for the drone to be produced once an egg is laid. So he's at the end of the queue time-wise. He has one single purpose, that is to mate. And so depending on the hive, sometimes the average hive of 60,000 may have 500 or 600 drones. Sometimes they'll have more, and frequently before they swarm, they'll make a lot more drones also. But some say that when the bees make the cells in the hive, some of the cells are made slightly bigger, and so the queen comes to them and knows that she should put a fertilized egg in there. Others say that it's up to her. So I'm not sure that there's a study that shows really how that happens, but a significant there's a percentage that of unfertilized eggs that are laid to ensure that there's sufficient drones in the system to mate with queens. They're accepted in all hives. About 4 years ago, we did a study over at the zoo in the Manhattan Zoo, and you can mark queens. So I was training some soldiers how to mark queens, and one of the best ways is to use drones. Drones can't sting. So we marked, from 6 hives, we marked drones 6 different colors for each hive. We went back in a week and checked, and there were drones of every color in every hive. So apparently they can go to any hive. They don't really even feed themselves. They'll go in and beg for food from the workers, and they're taken care of. But generally, about 10:30 or so in the morning, they'll issue from the hive and go out to a drone concentration area, and and it's usually a mile or so away. I know where two of them are here. And they've been there for a long time. Apparently they somehow form, and usually along a fence line or a tree line or some definable area, and you'll see this big flock of, it looks like flies or something up there, but it's 6,000 or 8,000 or so drones that go out to this drone concentration area and hover there. And this, one of the ones I know, there's about a two-quarter sections of a fence, and they move back and forth up and down this fence line, and just one big blob of bees, and they wait for an unmated queen to find them. So if it's a pharaoh hive, there aren't many pharaoh hives left, wild hive, or if it's one of a domestic hive that's creating a new queen, the queen will, after her skeleton gets hard enough for her to fly, will fly out to mate. And somehow they find these drone concentration areas. And also nature has provided so that the drones from her hive, so there's no inbreeding, will not go as far out as she will generally go to be bred. So that keeps the inbreeding down. And then she will breed with 14 or 15 drones. The drones die, and she flies back, takes on about 5 million sperm, and flies back to the hive, a mile or more, right back to the hive, and becomes the queen for that hive. And in a day or two, she usually starts laying eggs again, and so they'll adopt her as the queen. When she's brand new, just out of the comb, after she's hatched, they don't pay much attention to her in there. But once she comes back, the breeding also stimulates that pheromone, so they adopt her, and away she goes. There's a lot of good characteristics about bees. One that they have with regard to drones that I'm glad we didn't adopt is that the worker bees will force the drones out in September or so, and won't feed them, so they'll die. Fewer mouths in the hive to feed during the winter. And so there won't be any drones in there now, and sometime probably in maybe as early as late March and early April, the queen will start to produce drones. I think somebody saw drone cells in a hive here. Tom said he had drone cells in a hive. So depending on the weather, the bees will enable her to make drones so that there's sufficient drones out there when the mating season comes in April, May, and June, or all summer. So the hapless drone. There are more than bees in a hive. There's this thing called a Varroa Mite. There's one on the surface here, a blow-up of one. It's just like a wood tick that's specific to honeybees. About 25 years ago, it jumped hosts. It was on another type of bee in Africa, and it jumped host to the European honeybee, and it spread across this country rapidly. And so the only country in the world where there are none now, and now they think there may be, is in Australia. They've just come out of South Africa, or out of Africa, and spread around the world, probably brought into Florida. They started in the southeast here, but they almost decimated the bee business 20 years ago, and killed almost half of the beehives that existed in this country off. And so we're all still trying to figure out the best way to contend with that thing. They're in every hive, and they're there. And so is the small hive beetle. About 5 years ago, I don't remember seeing them here, but all of a sudden they just took off, and they are dangerous. And the Varroa Mite will kill off, if you don't do something with the Varroa, it will eventually kill your hive off. There are some strains of bees that are a little more hygienic and can cope with them a little better, but the general rule is that there are no bees that are immune to that mite today, other than Africanized bees. They've figured out how to cope with the Varroa Mite, and so the small hive beetle is in your hive also, and you can see one relative size to a bee here. They aren't attached to bees, but they thrive in a hive, and if you have a weak hive and the small hive beetle takes over, it ruins your honey. They'll lay eggs in the cells, and it causes the honey to slime, and the bees won't even use if you clean that up, the bees won't even use those frames any longer because it's such a it's such a foul thing. And so you have to cope with this guy also, and then always, and these have always been there, and that's the wax moth, these little moths that fly around your light at nighttime when you light it up. There's two forms of them, a lesser and a greater, and they too, if the hive is a little weak, can take over. Sometimes the hive will abscond, all the bees will leave, and they will leave their pupa burrow through the hive, and they leave this web everywhere, and it just ruins the hive. In nature, they have a purpose. In the wild bees, they would go in and clean those hives up, and then the bees would come back, and so they eat up all the excess protein and other things that might rot in there, and sort of clean up the wax, and then the bees can come back into that. Another swarm of bees could go in there and clean it up and take over. But if you're going to try to make honey and enjoy the hobby of beekeeping, you just don't want that to happen. So they are there, and something you're going to have to learn to contend with. And we'll build on those as we get further into the presentation.